I want to give you a hypothetical scenario. Suppose the San Francisco 49ers, in the 7th round of the 2026 NFL Draft, decide to take this man right here, Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia. If Pavia gets drafted, it likely will be in the 7th round. So I'm just using him as a hypothetical example here. After the draft is done, General Manager John Lynch takes to the podium and answers questions from the media about the class, all while being extremely excited that they got Pavia in the 7th round because they liked the way he played at Vanderbilt and liked his ability to win games. Then, Lynch says, without any hint of irony whatsoever, and being completely serious, that if Pavia is even half as good as what they expect him to be, then he'll be the greatest 7th round choice that the team has ever made. To say that would raise some eyebrows would be putting it lightly, especially seeing how many good 7th round picks your organization has made over the years. From your 2-time Pro Bowl long snapper of 13 years, Brian Jennings, to wide receiver Jawan Jennings, to, of course, your starting quarterback and the man you're giving $265 million to, Brock Purdy. If you say that Pavia, if he's even half as good as you think he's going to be, will be the greatest 7th round pick in franchise history, then your expectations are basically for him to make the Hall of Fame, which is absurd for just about any draft pick, let alone a freaking 7th rounder. I'm not saying that general managers and teams shouldn't love the guys that they picked, because if they didn't, it would just be a giant waste. But maybe let's pump the brakes and not say anything that you're immediately going to regret. And folks, we have a story like that for you today. Because in 1970, the Houston Oilers were not a very good team, as they finished dead last in the AFC Central with an abysmal 3-10-1 record, following up their playoff season in 1969 in the AFL with arguably their worst season in franchise history. After the Oilers started the year with a 2-1 record, they won just 1 of their final 11 games. And by the end of the year, only the Boston Patriots and New Orleans Saints had a worse record than the Oilers had. And while there were many reasons why the Oilers stunk in 1970, including a defense that ranked second to last in points allowed and yards allowed, and dead last in passing touchdowns allowed, one of the big reasons was an anemic running game, especially in the second half of the season. From week 7 through week 14, so over the team's final 8 games, the Oilers had the 4th fewest rushing yards in football, averaging under 100 yards per game at a time when the league-wide average was well over 120 yards per game. In half of their games, the Oilers ran for under 100 yards, which was really bad, and made them one of just 7 teams to do that. And not only was Houston in the bottom half of the league in yards per carry, but their leading rusher on the season, rookie Joe Dawkins, had 517 yards, meaning that the leading rusher on the Oilers ranked 28th in the league in rushing yards at a time when there were 26 teams in the league. Bottom line, the Oilers needed a lot of help in a lot of places, and the running game seemed like it needed a huge upgrade if it was going to compete in the AFC Central in 1971. But the way that the Oilers went about this was, well, it might not have been the smartest move, I'll put it that way. And I don't mean their approach to drafting the player in question, but rather what they said after the draft that more than half a century later deserves a deep dive today for how stupid it was. Because if you want to know why the Oilers were largely a laughingstock during the early 70s, stories like this are a big reason why. Because this is the story behind one of the dumbest draft picks in Oilers history, and when great expectations produce great disappointment. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, hype up that video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for hyping up the video, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that Houston had a problem. But before I talk about the actual pick that the Oilers made, we need some context to understand not only how this event worked, as in the NFL draft, but also the prior draft picks that the Oilers made in the 5th round, which is the round that this incident takes place in. Back in the 60s and early 70s, the 5th round was somewhat of a crapshoot. Yes, you could still find high-quality talent in this round, but for the most part, those players were few and far between, as just making the roster seemed like a win. At the 1970 NFL draft, of the 26 players taken in the 5th round, 12 of them, so just about half of them, never even played a snap in the league. And at the 1969 NFL draft, of the 26 players taken in the 5th round, 15 of them, so more than half of them, never played a snap. So right off the bat, you can get an idea of how the 5th round worked back in the early 70s. It was hard to find talent. However, that's not to say that the Oilers didn't acquire some highly talented players in the 5th round back in the day. You're going to be seeing clips of these players throughout the rest of the video, and it will become very obvious as to why as this story plays out. While the Oilers didn't hit often in the 5th round, because no one did, they were able to strike gold on occasion. During the 1964 draft, for example, they drafted Texas A&M Kingsville running back Sid Blanks. Blanks would finish his rookie season as an All-Star after he led the entire American Football League with 6 rushing touchdowns. It seems somewhat crazy that 6 touchdowns in a 14-game season would be enough to lead the entire league, but that was the AFL back then. Combine that with his 56 receptions, which ranks 7th in the entire league, and his 5.2 yards per carry, which ranks 2nd in the league, and he ended the year with over 1,250 yards from scrimmage, which is a good number for anyone to have in a 14-game season, let alone a rookie, let alone a 5th round pick. 2 years later, at the 1966 draft, the Oilers drafted an even better running back in the 5th round, taking this man right here, Mississippi State running back Hoyle Granger. Granger was one of the best runners in the American Football League, and you're seeing why with some of these highlights. In his 2nd season in 1967, he finished with close to 1,500 yards from scrimmage, which was the top total in the entire league and was the top total across all of professional football, beating Leroy Kelly of the Cleveland Browns in the rival National Football League by 7 yards. Granger finished inside the top 4 of yards per scrimmage in the AFL in 1967, 1968, and 1969, making it to the All-Star game twice along the way, and being named an AP second-team All-Pro during that 1967 campaign, being arguably the primary reason on offense as to why the Oilers won the division and advanced to the league title game. And to give you an idea of just how good Granger was, over that 3-season stretch from 1967 to 1969, Granger had 3,773 yards from scrimmage. No player had more yards from scrimmage across the entire league than he did. And the only other player to have more than 3,500 yards from scrimmage in that stretch was New York Jets wide receiver and future Hall of Famer Don Maynard. In fact, by the time Granger's career with the Oilers was done, only wide receiver Charlie Hennigan, one of the greatest players in AFL history, had more yards from scrimmage in franchise history. So the Oilers definitely struck gold there in the 5th round. And then, 1 year later, they struck gold again when they drafted this man right here, Lincoln defensive back Zeke Moore. Even though the drafts between the AFL and the NFL were combined by that point, and picking in the 5th round meant picking in the 120s. Moore ended his career with the Oilers as one of the greatest defensive backs in franchise history, starting over 100 games across 11 seasons and making it to the AFL All-Star Game in 1969 and the Pro Bowl in 1970, with his 1970 season finishing with a team-high 6 interceptions, which also ranked inside the top 10 of the entire league. By the time that Moore was done playing for the Oilers after the 1977 season, he ranked 5th all-time in franchise history with 24 interceptions, and his 145 games played with the club was the franchise record. Not only was Moore a really good player, but he was a lifelong Oiler. And if you can get 2 Pro Bowls and 11 seasons out of someone drafted in the 5th round, along with the guy who's durable and will play just about every single game for you, then you did something right. So the 3 men you're seeing highlights of the rest of the way were not just good 5th round picks, but they were really good 5th round picks. Sid Blanks, Hoyle Granger, and Zeke Moore were some of the top players in all of football at their respective positions. They weren't just good for being 5th round picks. They were good, period. I want you to keep all of that in mind when I talk about the man that the Oilers drafted in the 5th round of the 1971 NFL Draft, which was a running back out of Grambling State by the name of Willie Armstrong. Armstrong was a 3-time All-SWAC selection at running back in 1968, 1969, and 1970, and picked up close to 3,000 yards across his 4 years with the school. Obviously, draft analysis was a lot different back then, and a lot can change from the start of a season in college football until the end. I don't think anyone had Fernando Mendoza as a 1st-round pick, let alone the number 1 pick in the draft when the season started. But for what it's worth, at the start of the 1970 season, one publication said that Armstrong was likely going to be a 1st-round pick in 1971. However, when we got to the draft, and by the time the first 4 rounds of the draft came and went, 19 running backs had been taken, from John Riggins with pick 6 to Vince Clemens with pick 102, and Willie Armstrong was not one of them. The Oilers were flabbergasted by this. They couldn't believe that Armstrong was on the board by this point, and that they were going to get a chance to get a darn good running back all the way in round 5 that they felt slipped through the cracks of every other team. So with pick number 109, the Oilers decided to end Armstrong's wait, and they took the Grambling running back in the 5th round. Naturally, the Oilers were excited about the pick, and when they spoke to the press afterwards, they made sure to convey that excitement. Charlie Hall was the director of player personnel for the Oilers during this draft, and if he said something like, "We were stunned to see that Armstrong fell that far, and we're excited to have him in Houston," then this would be a non-story. If Hall said something like, "We feel that Armstrong is a guy who can come in and contribute right away and make a really good impact with us," then this would be a non-story. If Hall said something like, "We think we got a really good player in the 5th round," then again, this would be a non-story. You get the idea. So long as Hall says something that makes him reasonably excited about this pick, then I am not making this video 55 years later. Alas, he did not do that. Oh man, he did not do that. Because in the eyes of Charlie Hall, the Oilers just drafted Jesus Christ himself. As Hall said, it could be the best 5th round choice we ever made if Armstrong lives up to half of our expectations. Seriously, if Armstrong is even 50% as good as we think he's going to be, he'll be the greatest 5th round pick that this franchise has ever made. Which, I'm sorry, what? Seriously, did they think Armstrong could walk on water or something? Again, I'm showing highlights of other 5th round picks that this team had made before Armstrong. You had not 1, not 2, but 3 5th round picks who made it to an All-Star game or a Pro Bowl with your team. One of them just led your team in interceptions and had gotten All-Star honors in back-to-back years. back when that actually meant something. Another one was the literal league leader in yards from scrimmage one year and led the entire league across a 3-year stretch. He was one of the best offensive players in AFL history. It's not like you've drafted non-contributor after non-contributor in this round. It's not like the best player you've ever drafted in the 5th round was a guy who played 2 seasons for you and got 1 sack. To say before the man even plays a snap that if he's even half as good as you think he could be, he'd be the best 5th round pick you've ever made, that is diabolical. That would mean that your expectations for Willie Armstrong would be the Hall of Fame. At worst, he'd be in the Hall of Very Good. Your expectations are somewhere in the ballpark of 10,000 career yards, which is absurd to ask of anyone, let alone a 5th round pick. Just an absolutely insane statement by Hall that was also incredibly disrespectful to Grambling and Moore, who, oh yeah, were still on the freaking team. They hadn't gotten rid of them by that point. Moore just made the Pro Bowl with you. To say that when you have one of the best defensive backs in football still on your roster is just absurd. I get hyping up a draft pick, but to this extent, and at the disrespect of players on your team who are great and are some of the best players in your young franchise's history, that is just insane. So, why aren't you seeing any highlights of Armstrong with the Oilers? Well, you probably figured out the reason, and that is the fact that he played in 0 games. I don't know what Hall's expectations were, but I'm fairly confident that they were not for him to never suit up for the team. If we take half of Hall's expectations and extrapolate that to Armstrong's numbers, you don't even get 0. You get undefined because you cannot divide by 0. The Oilers thought that their 5th round pick was going to be a Hall of Famer. Instead, he was one of the 10 players drafted in the 5th round that year that did not play a single game in the league. For what it's worth, only 1 player drafted in the 5th round that year even made it to a Pro Bowl or got any sort of AP All-Pro recognition at any point during their career. And that was Steelers player Larry Brown, who had to switch positions from tight end to offensive tackle in order to do it, which just makes it all the more insane to put these kind of expectations on Willie Armstrong when the guys you've been watching this entire time are very clearly the exception to the rule and not the rule. So what did we learn from all of this? You're allowed to be excited about drafting a player, and no one is saying otherwise. In fact, I'd be concerned if you weren't excited about a player, seeing as you literally could have chosen anyone, so you might as well choose a guy that you like. But under no circumstances should you ever say before anyone, let alone a 5th round pick, takes a snap, that the man you just drafted is going to be one of the all-time greats. If your expectations are for a 5th round pick that you've drafted to become a Hall of Famer, then your expectations are even more ridiculous than a 5-year-old who gets a teddy bear and thinks that the teddy bear is going to come to life and magically clean his room whenever he wants. Because when it came to coming up with reasonable expectations for Willie Armstrong and the player that the Oilers drafted, Houston, they had a problem. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.